Nebraska, we're so much more than just radio.
Pyongyang. Oh boy.
It's time now for this morning's live reading from the Omaha World Herald. This morning's reading is being brought to us by a grant from the Omaha Association of the Blind. And we have our fine readers on board now, so let's welcome in, please, Ralph Moronco and Beverly Leidick.
Good morning, Paul, and good morning, listeners. Happy to be here with you on a chilly April 1st.
Good morning. This story is from Washington. President Barack Obama and Chinese President Xi Jinping pledged Thursday to cooperate to confront the North Korean nuclear threat while working to narrow persistent differences over cybersecurity, human rights, and maritime conflicts. Obama, opening a global nuclear security summit near the White House, also joined leaders of Japan and South Korea in calling for further joint steps to deter North Korea. The display of diplomatic unity came as world leaders sought to ramp up pressure on the insular country's government following worrisome nuclear provocations. President Xi and I are both committed to the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, Obama said as he and Xi sat down for a meeting on the sidelines of the summit. The United States has long urged China, North Korea's traditional ally, to take a more forceful role in pressing the North to give up its nuclear weapons program. Obama said the United States welcomes a peaceful, strong China despite tensions with the Asian powerhouse over its island building in the disputed South China Sea. The Obama administration was encouraged by China's role in passing stringent new UN sanctions punishing the North and urging Beijing to implement those sanctions dutifully. In a joint statement, the two countries said they plan to hold annual talks on nuclear security and to promote the work international agencies are doing. China says its plans to convert its miniature neutron sources reactor at Shenzhen University to low-enriched uranium and is willing to convert other such reactors built by China that are in other countries. Both countries say they'll work to fight smuggling of nuclear materials and to strengthen cooperation on securing radioactive sources. I very much appreciate President Xi's willingness to have conversations on these issues in a constructive way, Obama said. Xi said the United States and China must work together to promote peace in light of the rising global terror threat. As for their disputes and disagreements, the Chinese leader said the two sides should seek active solutions through dialogue and consultation. Long at odds over human rights, the United States and China in recent years have sparred regularly over China's move to build artificial islands and military facilities in the South China Sea. Japan and South Korea are similarly alarmed about China's territorial designs on the East China Sea. Tensions appear set to intensify with a coming ruling from an international tribunal that could challenge the legal basis of some of Beijing's sweeping territorial claims. China accuses the United States of stoking tensions by sending military ships and planes through the South China Sea on freedom of navigation maneuvers. Still, it was concerns about North Korea's recent nuclear test and rocket launch that drove the agenda on the first day of the two-day summit, Obama's last major chance to focus global attention on disparate nuclear security threats before his presidency ends early next year.
From Kolkata, India, a long section of an overpass under construction collapsed Thursday in a crowded Kolkata neighborhood and sent tons of concrete and steel slamming onto midday traffic, killing at least 22 people and leaving scores of others injured, police said. More people were feared trapped in the debris, and resuscitators used saws, small cranes, and their bare hands to search for survivors. Smashed yellow taxis, destroyed rickshaws, and bloody legs of trapped people jutted from the fallen girders in concrete. The overpass, spanned near the width of the street, was designed to ease traffic through the densely crowded Bara Bazaar neighborhood. About 300 feet of the overpass fell while other sections remained standing. It came down with a huge crashing sound, said Yogesh Sharma, who was sitting at a roadside tea stand with friends. I left my cup of tea and ran, said Sharma, a 23-year-old resident. At least 21 people were killed, a police official said, on condition of anonymity because he was not authorized to speak to the media. More than 70 people were taken to 2 hospitals in Kolkata, officials said. It was not immediately clear how many people were missing. Army troops and personnel from the National Disaster Response Force joined the effort to pull people from smashed vehicles. Huge cranes and other equipment were brought to the site to begin clearing the rubble. Workers also used cutting torches to pry open the slabs. The operation was a very, very challenging task, said O.P. Singh, chief of the Disaster Response Force. Rescuers also used dogs and special cameras to find people who were trapped, he said. The area was very, very crowded. Motorized rickshaws, taxis, there was a lot of traffic, one witness told NDTV television. Mamatama Banajiri, the top elected official of the West Bengal state, said a private builder had missed several deadlines for completing the construction. The contract for the overpass was signed in 2007, and it was expected to be completed in 2 years. Banerjee accused the previous communist government in West Bengal of not adhering to building regulations. We completed nearly 70% of the construction without any mishaps, said K.P. Rao, a top official of IBRCL Infrastructure Company, which was building the overpass. We have to go into the details to find out whether the collapse was due to any technical or quality issue. It was a total act of God, said a colleague, Dilip, who uses one name. Building collapses are common in India where regulations are poorly enforced, and construction companies often use substandard materials.
From Washington, from Akron to Tampa Bay, from New York City to San Francisco, Medicare today launches an ambitious experiment that changes how it pays for hip and knee replacements. The goal is to raise quality and lower costs for the most common inpatient surgery Medicare covers. The idea is to follow patients more closely to smooth their recovery and head off unwanted complications that increase costs. Medicare will be using financial rewards and penalties to foster better coordination among hospitals, doctors, and rehab centers. Hospitals are on board, but orthopedic surgeons have some qualms. Consumer groups will be watching closely. The new system goes into effect in 67 metro areas across the country, including Lincoln, that are home to millions of Medicare beneficiaries and about 800 hospitals. Similar experiments may be in store for other procedures, such as heart bypass surgery. It's part of a broader effort under the Affordable Care Act to align traditional Medicare with changes that are pushing the U.S. healthcare system toward greater accountability. Initially, patients and families might not notice much beyond some additional forms to sign from the participating providers. Patients still can choose their doctors and hospitals. If the concept works, patients will see smoother coordination and better results as they leave the hospital and take on the challenges of recovery and rehab. There's likely to be greater emphasis on communication and support to ensure that patients, once discharged, aren't left to fend for themselves, said Joshua Seidman of the consulting firm Avalair Health, which has been working with hospitals. Hospitals are supportive, surgeons less so. Over time, surgeons fear there will be subtle pressure to discourage joint replacement for patients who are thought to have less chance of a smooth recovery. Picture an obese, lifelong smoker hobbling around on a painfully deteriorated knee, for example. The overall goal is a good one. They want to see where you can cut out the waste, said Dr. Alexandra Page, a San Diego clinician representing the American Association of Orthopedic Surgeons. But one of the unintended consequences is going to be cherry picking. Hospitals are going to want to have patients who are going to do well. That's unlikely, Medicare says, because the experiment is designed so that hospitals can keep treating a wide range of patients in varying condition. Nevertheless, consumers groups say they'll be watching too. Medicare paid for more than 400,000 hip and knee replacements in 2014 at a cost of $7 billion to taxpayers for the hospitalizations alone.
From Washington, the Pentagon plans to deploy an armored brigade combat team to Eastern Europe next February as part of an ongoing effort to reassure allies worried about an increasingly aggressive Russia. The decision will keep 3 fully equipped Army brigades in Europe on a continuous basis. It underscores promises U.S. defense leaders made to protect Europe and sends a message to Moscow that any actions against allies would be unacceptable. The Army will send a full set of equipment with the brigade to Europe. Earlier plans called for the Pentagon to rotate troops in and out of Europe and have them use training equipment already there. The new proposal will remove the pre-positioned equipment, send it to be refurbished, and allow U.S. forces to bring more robust, modern equipment with them when they deploy. There are about 4,200 soldiers in an armored brigade, along with hundreds of heavy vehicles, tanks, self-propelled howitzers, and other equipment. Sending the brigade with its own equipment, Pentagon officials spokesman Laura Seal said, also will allow the military to practice its ability to rapidly deploy to Europe. This will be the most modernized equipment the Army has to offer and will, over the next year, replace the less modern training equipment we put in Europe over the last several years, she said. About 62,000 U.S. military forces are permanently based in Europe, and about 25,000 of those are Army soldiers. Under the new plan, there would be about 29,200 U.S. soldiers in Europe at any given time. This week's announcement is aimed at easing worries in Europe, where allies had heard rumblings about the equipment being removed and feared the United States was scaling back its support. Officials also said the Army would send additional communications equipment to Europe so that headquarters units could have the radios, computers, and other equipment needed to work with the brigades. Over the past 9 months, Defense Secretary Ashton Carter has pledged additional military support for the region during trips to Eastern Europe and in NATO meetings. Last June, Carter announced in Estonia that the United States would spread about 250 tanks, armored vehicles, and other military equipment across 6 former Soviet bloc nations to help reassure NATO allies. Each set of equipment would be enough to outfit a military unit and would go at least temporarily to Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Romania. In February, the Pentagon announced it would seek $3.4 billion in the 2017 budget to increase troop rotations and military exercises in Europe.
When they pushed him off the prison bus into the swirling dust of the Mexican border, they gave him only one instruction: run. He watched the other inmates scamper in all directions across the line dividing Laredo, Texas from Mexico. This is how it ends, he thought to himself. After 3 honorable years of service in the United States Navy and only 1 serious run-in with the law, he was being set adrift here in a deadly Mexican border town hundreds of miles from home. So he ran. Juan Valadez once embraced the Navy's ideals: be your best, serve with honor, protect your country. But because he was born in Mexico and taken to the United States as an infant, his pact with America when he joined the military came with one catch. If he ever was convicted of a felony, he would be deported. The only legal way to return would be in a coffin, a final mercy the United States government grants veterans who die after deportation. They take you back once it's not no good for you anymore, what Valadez said. For much of its wartime history, the United States has offered citizenship to non-citizens who enlisted in the military and completed boot camp. The practice was stopped after the Vietnam War, then resumed a generation later by the Army in 2009 and the Navy after that. Valadez, 33, is one of the thousands who served in those middle years when naturalization wasn't a part of boot camp graduation. Advocates estimate there are now at least 2,000 U.S. veterans living in northern Mexico, many in border towns such as Tijuana and Juarez, where English speakers can find decent paying work in telemarketing and other service sector jobs. In Mexico, Valadez said, his military training and fluent English have drawn the keenest interest from a powerful drug cartel. In a single day, he said, he could make what he earns in a month running the sushi restaurant he owns in downtown Juarez. But he has a wife and a young daughter now, and he resists picking up the phone. Valadez said that going to work for the cartel, even for simple jobs such as driving a truck, would not be only dangerous, but also a betrayal. I'm still an American. I'm still a sailor, Valadez said. Valadez conceded that he could have done far more to secure a foothold in America. After boot camp, when he was deployed south of Yemen in the Gulf of Aden, he could have found someone on his ship who could naturalize him, as the law permits immigrants on active duty abroad, but he never did and eventually forgot about it. The modern path to naturalization is far easier, allowing boot camp graduates to participate in a naturalization ceremony. But naturalization ceremonies were not part of boot camp when Valadez enlisted. After the Vietnam War, military members had to complete 1 year of honorable service to even begin applying for citizenship. After the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, President George W. Bush signed an executive order shortening the requirement, clearing the way to a quicker path for citizenship. The result was scattershot. Some enterprising service members in the country illegally understood the process after deployment and were diligent in filing their applications through their closest embassy. Some thought the boot camp graduation was itself a citizenship ceremony. Once deported, veterans are no longer able to get medical coverage, though the Department of Veterans Affairs will mail them medications. When Valadez returned from the duty in the Gulf of Aden, he left the military and went looking for quick cash. He found it in marijuana. He told a friend of a friend that he would carry a shipment from El Paso, Texas to Columbus, Ohio. He said he didn't know it at the time, but he was working for the same cartel that would later ask about his services in Juarez. The scheme was a setup, Valadez said, and he was convicted of conspiracy to transport drugs, a felony. He spent 3 years in prison. Then his deportation to Mexico, a country all but foreign to him, was essentially a life sentence.
And two shooting stories, one from Richmond, Virginia. A gunman fatally shot a Virginia state trooper Thursday at a busy bus terminal in the capital city of Richmond before he was shot dead by 2 other troopers, police said. 2 civilians were also shot, but were expected to recover. Trooper Chad Dermeyer, 37, died after being shot multiple times, according to Virginia State Police Superintendent Stephen Flaherty. State Police spokeswoman Corinne Geller said the civilians' injuries were not life-threatening. The suspect's name was not released. A small army of law enforcement officers in tactical gear and dozens of cruisers and emergency response vehicles flooded to the station. From Baltimore, 2 men died Thursday after plainclothes officers opened fire on them when they found the men aiming guns at someone across the street, Baltimore police said. It's likely that the men were fatally shot by police, but investigators were still trying to piece together what happened. T.J. Smith, a Baltimore Police Department spokesman, said at Thursday night's briefing with reporters, 1 man carried an automatic rifle with a scope and laser that was loaded with at least 20 rounds, Smith said. He said the other man had a handgun. If you see one of the weapons that was recovered, this rifle, it's a scary weapon that was aimed at someone in the middle of the afternoon, Smith said. He said the Special Operations Unit officers were on patrol in an unmarked car when they happened upon the men who had gotten out of a vehicle. While in plain clothes, the officers wore vests that identified them on the front and back as police. The suspects who had the 2 guns were aiming those guns at people across the street, Smith said. They were aiming those guns and they were saying something to someone who was not one of the officers. He said shots were fired by police. Both suspects were hit and both suspects at the scene were deceased. Smith said he didn't know if the men had refused to comply with any commands police may have given. Smith said he did not know if the armed men had fired any shots or if anyone else had. The identities of the men who were killed were not released.
And finally, from New York, low-income Americans are expected to be able to apply for help from the federal government in paying for internet access in December. The Federal Communications Commissioners voted 3-2 along party lines Thursday to expand the $1.5 billion Lifeline program, which will now cover an internet connection as well as phone services for $9.25 per month. It can be used with cell phone internet or home internet. Lifeline was started in 1985 and expanded to include wireless phones in 2005. It's paid for with fees on Americans' phone bills.
And that may help some of our listeners with internet access, which would be nice. From Lincoln at 20 minutes past the hour, we'll turn to state and regional news. A state senator is hoping the legislature can step in and stop a controversial new license plate from being issued. State Senator Burke Harr of Omaha introduced an amendment Thursday that would delay issuing a new standard license plate design for a year. He introduced the proposal amid concern from constituents about the plate's depiction of the sower and its perceived lewdness. The bill would extend the current design, featuring a goldenrod sprig and a meadowlark, for another year, giving Governor Pete Ricketts time to come up with a new design and gather input from the public, he said. I thought this was important enough to have a debate, Harr said. We have become the butt of jokes. To be debated by the legislature, however, the proposal will have to find another vehicle. Harr filed his amendment to Legislative Bill 768, a Speaker priority bill sponsored by Bellevue Senator Tommy Garrett that would create a Choose Life fund option license plate. But Garrett said he plans to pull the bill today, saying it has a number of hostile amendments attached and that the legislature can't afford another filibuster. We're out of time, he said. The new plate design has generated buzz since it was unveiled by the governor last week. Some say it's boring, while others say the image of the sower as designed carries a sexual connotation. And while the state says the plate depicts the sower that is a statue atop the state capitol, some have raised concerns that the design more closely resembles a sower sculpture on a bell tower on Michigan State's campus. He said the other two-dimensional designs of the sower are better, such as the one on the 1954 Nebraska Territorial Centennial stamp. Harr said that he's also looking to see if there are other bills to which he could attach his amendment and give it a shot to be debated this year. State law requires that new standard license plates be issued every 6 years. The new plates featuring the sower are set to roll out in January 2017. Taylor Gage, the governor's spokesperson, declined to comment on Harr's proposal, but state officials have previously said the plate design is final and that printing is already in progress. I would hope we could just put a hold on that order if it were in the state's best interest, Harr said.
Also from Lincoln, Nebraskans who can't walk 200 feet without stopping will qualify for a handicap parking permit under legislation given final approval Thursday by state lawmakers. The measure was one of 24 bills listed on the legislature's consent calendar that received third-round approval and now goes to the governor for consideration. Consent calendar is reserved for bills deemed non-controversial. Legislative Bill 865, introduced by Senator Sue Crawford of Bellevue, broadened the definition of a person with a handicap or disability for the purposes of special parking privileges. Under the bill, those unable to walk 200 feet, about 2/3 the length of a football field, without stopping, can get a special permit that allows them to park in designated spaces. The governor has 5 days to decide whether to sign or veto the bills. If he declines to sign absent a veto, The bill is enacted. Other proposals that passed final reading Thursday: banned substances in sports. Legislative Bill 823, sponsored by Senator Tyson Larson of O'Neill, gives the state athletic commissioner the authority to create a list of banned substances for athletes who participate in amateur and professional sporting events. The legislation also gives the commission authority to suspend or fine athletes caught using the banned substances. School driving permits. Legislative Bill 814, introduced by Senator Kurt Friesen of Henderson, allows students between the ages of 14 and 16 who live outside a city or village to qualify for a school driving permit. Under current law, such students must live at least 1.5 miles outside the city where the school is located. State institution patient records. Legislative Bill 816, sponsored by Senator Jim Scheer of Norfolk, expands access to the records of those who received treatment in state-run hospitals and institutions. The bill provides access to current health providers, police, or county attorneys investigating a crime, or upon a request after a patient has been dead for at least 50 years. Protecting medical whistleblowers. Legislative Bill 750, introduced by Senator Brett Lindstrom of Omaha, protects nurses and others who have a duty to report medical practice violations that could result in disciplinary action against a provider or employer.
A judge stopped Anthony Garcia's scheduled quadruple murder trial in its tracks Thursday, causing a spectacle rarely seen at the Douglas County Courthouse. A high-profile defendant without a defense team. That's where Garcia, sitting at the end of the long courtroom table in his yellow jumpsuit, found himself Thursday. In a hastily called afternoon hearing, Judge Gary Randall allowed two local attorneys, Dan Stockman and Jeff Loishan, to withdraw from Garcia's defense team, a move that stripped Garcia's Chicago defense team of their temporary right to practice law in Nebraska. I don't know that I have the right to tell them they can't withdraw, Randall said, citing ethical concerns raised by Stockman and Loishan. He turned to Allison Moda, husband Robert Moda Jr. and father-in-law Robert Moda Sr. As of now, he said, you no longer have the right to practice law in Nebraska. We'll delay the trial. Garcia was supposed to go on trial Monday on charges that he, as revenge for his firing from Creighton University Medical Center, killed 4 Omahans associated with the program, including Dr. William Hunter's 11-year-old son, the Hunter's 57-year-old house cleaner, and Dr. Roger Brumback and his wife. With Randall's decision, the trial is delayed indefinitely. But Randall's decision didn't address the meat of the issue, whether the Modas should be allowed to continue to represent Garcia. Before Randall gets to that issue, the Modas have to find an attorney who is willing to offer them a guest pass to practice law on that lawyer's license. And that has happened. The Chicago defense team for Anthony Garcia has secured an agreement with local attorneys that could allow them to continue to represent Garcia. Allison Moda, Robert Moda Jr., and Robert Moda Sr. filed a motion Friday saying Jeremy Jorgensen, David Reed, and James Owen have agreed to allow them to use their law licenses as their entree into the Nebraska court system. Attorneys who haven't passed the bar in Nebraska must obtain the temporary right to practice law in the state by using another attorney's license. The Modas, who were hired by Garcia's parents, had an agreement with 2 other Omaha attorneys, Dan Stockman and Jeff Loishan, but those attorneys requested that they be removed from the Garcia case, citing ethical concerns that arose after Allison Moda made statements about DNA evidence exonerating Garcia. DNA experts say the evidence does not do that.
Here's a story from Grand Island. A Hall County District Court jury awarded $25,000 Tuesday to a Grand Island letter carrier who was bitten by a dog while delivering mail in 2013. Seth Gruen, the letter carrier, brought the civil case against David Hernandez and Candida Rivera, the owners of the dog. Gruen was delivering mail to 105 East 14th Street on January 3, 2013. He alleged that the dog exited the front door of the residence and bit his right arm. Gruen said that while trying to remove the dog's grip, he tore his right rotator cuff and right bicep tendon. Hernandez and Rivera admitted that their dog was involved in the incident with Gruen. According to court documents, they denied that they were negligent or were strictly liable for the incident. In the original court pleadings, Gruen asked for more than $42,000 plus compensation for pain and suffering. That figure consisted of more than $30,000 for medical expenses and about $12,000 in lost wages. Gruen's lawyer was Mark Porto. The defendants were represented by Daniel Plasek. During the trial, Porto asked for about $52,000 plus compensation for pain and suffering. That figure included $36,457 in medical expenses and about $16,000 for lost wages, Porto said. The main issue during the trial was whether Gruen's shoulder injury was due completely to the dog incident or whether the shoulder had been torn before the accident, Porto said. Porto is considering requesting a new trial because he hoped the jury would award at least $36,457. That amount was the bare bones minimum needed to fix the shoulder, he said Thursday. Gruen still works for the United States Postal Service, but now lives in Arizona, Porter said.
Christy Shepard knows what it's like to be a family member of a murder victim. She also knows what it's like to learn that the two men convicted in the killing, one given a death sentence, the other life in prison without parole, were innocent. The guilt has been awful, she said. It is horrible to think that you prayed, wished, helped, and condoned to bring harm to someone else, and then to find out that it wasn't deserved and later learn what they went through. Shepard's perceptions of a fair criminal justice system were shattered after DNA evidence proved the innocence of the men more than a decade after they were convicted. Shepard is a 41-year-old criminal justice counselor and victim advocate from Ada, Oklahoma, whose cousin was raped and slain in 1982. She was the keynote speaker at Creighton University on Thursday at the annual reception for Nebraskans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. She is in the state to help the campaign by Retain a Just Nebraska, a group that aims to prevent the state's death penalty from being reinstated. The Nebraska legislature repealed capital punishment last year, but supporters of the death penalty obtained sufficient signatures to put the question on November's general election ballot. Nebraska has 10 men on death row, but no means to carry out a death sentence because the state has not been successful in obtaining the drugs required for lethal injection. Shepard's cousin, 21-year-old cocktail waitress Debbie Carter, was murdered in Ada. 5 years later, in 1987, Dennis Fritz and Ron Williamson were arrested and charged with capital murder. Williamson received a death sentence. Fritz got life in prison. We had no reason not to believe they were guilty, Shepard said. 11 years later, DNA testing proved that Williamson and Fritz had been wrongfully convicted. They were freed. Shepard said the family was shocked and in disbelief. They felt Carter's justice was being ripped away. What about all the other evidence and testimony? Does it just vanish? It was like being in a twilight zone. It fit nothing we knew to be true. The family eventually learned the case was plagued with unreliable evidence, and the prosecution had been built on junk science and the testimony of jailhouse snitches and convicts. The story became a legal thriller, The Innocent Man, author of John Grisham's first work of nonfiction. The real killer was eventually convicted and sent to prison for life. Shepard said there is no doubt that victims and their families deserve justice, but justice isn't served if someone is executed and authorities later learn of his innocence, she said. Shepard grew up believing in the death penalty. We've always had it, and in Oklahoma we use it, she said. In theory, it seems like that's the way it ought to be. The punishment fits the crime. But when you pick it apart, it just is a mess. Nearly 340 wrongfully convicted individuals in the United States have been exonerated through DNA testing since 1992, according to the Innocence Project, a national litigation and public policy organization. The wrongfully convicted men and women were jailed for an average of 14 years. The real perpetrators have been found in 140 of the cases. Shepard is a member of Oklahoma's first independent review of the state's capital punishment system. The bipartisan Oklahoma Death Penalty Review Commission recently held its first meeting. Nebraska's last execution was carried out using the electric chair in 1997. The state Supreme Court has since banned electrocution as cruel and unusual punishment. Nebraskans for the Death Penalty is leading the push to reinstate capital punishment. Organizers say the death penalty is just punishment for the most heinous crimes, debtors' unspeakable acts, and protects the public from the most dangerous people. Stephen Griffith, executive director of Nebraskans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, said Shepard's story illustrates the importance of ending the death penalty once and for all. Shepard said it doesn't necessarily feel good to know that her cousin's murderer is wasting away in prison. But the truth is that my aunt will never be made whole, she said. No court in the country can give her that.
Central High students got a front row seat to watch the judicial system in action Thursday when the Nebraska Supreme Court heard oral arguments for a case at the downtown high school. They watched attorneys polish their arguments and state Supreme Court judges ask pointed questions, and they learned a valuable lesson during a Q&A session after court adjourned. Don't refer to sitting judges as you guys. While the Supreme Court routinely travels to Nebraska's 2 law schools, this marked the first time the court heard arguments at a high school campus. Arguments were held earlier Thursday at the Creighton University School of Law. It was cool to be able to show off our school, Central Junior Elijah Parker said. About 150 students, most from advanced placement government or business law classes, attended the arguments in Central's auditorium. Stagecraft students helped set the stage and security was tight. A police dog swept the building and all attendees had to pass through handheld metal detector wands. Teachers spent the week getting students up to speed on the parental rights case the court heard and helped familiarize them with complex legal terminologies. Brian Fahey, a law clerk at the U.S. District Court for the District of Nebraska, who graduated from Central in 2003, visited classes Monday to brief students on the case and judicial processes. I know it can be tough to follow along with oral arguments, even as a law student, he said. The case, which has been winding its way through lower courts, involves 3 children whose stepfather wants to adopt them. The children's biological father was convicted of sexually assaulting the oldest daughter when she was 6 and is now serving a 16-year sentence in a Missouri prison. The biological father did not consent to the adoption. In 2014, the mother and stepfather asked a Lincoln County Court judge to terminate the biological father's parental rights on the grounds that he had abandoned his children by abusing his daughter and being imprisoned. The court agreed, but the biological father appealed, arguing that he still wanted to be involved in his children's lives. An appeals court sided with the biological father and said his permission was needed for the adoption to proceed. The mother and stepfather appealed that ruling and asked the Nebraska Supreme Court to weigh in. As the arguments were made, the judges asked attorneys Pat Heng, representing the mother and stepfather, and Todd Jeffers, representing the father, questions about whether abuse equates to abandonment and about what would be in the best interests of the children involved. Students watching said they struggled with separating the legal issues of the case from the ethics involved. Why should a father who molested his child retain parental rights? I thought it would be hard to defend somebody like that, Central Junior Amanda Halverson said. After oral arguments wrapped up, students were able to directly question the Supreme Court judges. Students asked about the schedule for oral arguments, about how judges remain impartial, and about the toll that high-profile cases take. Somebody has to deal with the tough issues in society, Chief Justice Michael Hebekin said. One of the reasons we came here today is to inspire you all to be involved. Hebekins gently rebuked a student who addressed the court as "you guys" in her question, and the judges reflected on the diversity of the current court, which includes 2 women but no minority members. I think we're gradually seeing the diversity of the bench mirror the diversity of our communities, Judge Stephanie Stacy said, but it starts with you. Judge Lindsay Miller Learman told students that while she was in law school, just 10% of the students were women. We shared bathrooms with the secretaries, she said. Stacy and other judges encouraged students to ask questions, think critically, and pursue a career in law if it interested them. My high school guidance counselor told me I should be a park ranger, Stacy said. If you're interested in the law, if you like the rules, the law might be for you. And you can go to law school and do almost anything with a law degree. Students and central teachers said the event helped bring alive the legal proceedings students normally just read about in textbooks. It opened up my eyes to the court process, Senior John Kramer said. I hope they got a feel for the democratic judicial system, that everybody has a right to their day in court, Social Studies Department Chair Gary Groff said. Students read about Brown versus Board of Education, but now they actually get to see it.
Nebraska's state officials are getting involved in the discussion about merging the Omaha and Douglas County crime labs. 4 state senators introduced a resolution this week asking for an interim study on the possibility of merging the 2 labs into a single one to be located at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. On Thursday, Nebraska Attorney General Doug Peterson and State Senator Bob Hilkeman of Omaha joined a group of officials from UNMC, Douglas County, Omaha, and other entities to discuss the crime lab proposal. Public safety is an important issue for me, and I feel having an accredited forensic lab in Douglas County can be a tool to better serve our community, county, and state, said Hilkeman, a sponsor of the resolution. Although Mayor Gene Stothard said earlier talks had momentum, Douglas County Sheriff Tim Dunning had pushed back against the UNMC plan, in part because his office might have to pay back about $4.5 million of drug forfeiture money that was used to renovate the county's lab. Stothard said the discussions have yielded a concept that's more than a crime lab. Not only would UNMC process all kinds of criminal evidence, but also the merged facility could house the coroner's office, the Nebraska Organ Recovery System, and the Lions Eye Bank of Nebraska. It could serve as a training site and help UNMC expand its criminal justice program. At Thursday's meeting, Dunning presented an alternate plan that would maintain the crime lab at the former Thomas Fitzgerald Veterans Home, operated by the county near 156th Street and West Maple Road. Some of the proposed UNMC lab would be moved there, he said. We just built this building about 6 years ago with about $5 million of seized asset money, Dunning said. But, he added, we think there's some value with co-locating some things there with UNMC. Peterson said he attended the meeting to see whether there could be more efficiency between a new facility and the State Patrol's crime lab. Peterson said he sees some good possibilities with what's being proposed at the University Med Center. I also appreciated the Med Center's willingness to serve the whole state. He said officials should be planning for the next 15 to 25 years rather than just the short term. Hilkeman's resolution, also sponsored by Senator Rick Kolowski, Bob Christ, and John McAllister, asks for a committee to study the possibility of the state becoming a partner in the crime lab. It calls for a committee of 5 lawmakers to review current facilities and determine the needs and options for a regional certified crime lab in the Omaha area. Meeting participants said they were open to the possibility and had agreed to keep discussions going. We're going to continue to explore multiple options, said UNMC Chancellor Jeffrey Gold. Everyone agreed that working together makes sense. Gold said UNMC could be involved in the project no matter where it is. There's just a lot of interest on trying to move state-of-the-art services and state-of-the-art education to better serve the people of Nebraska, which is exciting, he said. Stothard said she wants the full-service crime lab that's accredited and independent from law enforcement agencies. And she said the sheriff's proposal doesn't address some of that.
In the metro area today, 3 juveniles were arrested in connection with the theft of a pickup truck after Douglas County Sheriff's deputies planted a GPS device on the vehicle. The 3, all male, were booked into the Douglas County Youth Center on suspicion of felony theft, the sheriff's office said. The 2004 Chevrolet Colorado was stolen at about 5:30 p.m. Tuesday from a driveway near 84th and Hanover Streets. The truck contained tools worth about $6,000. A little less than 24 hours later, deputies met with the pickup's owner, who said he'd found his tools in a church dumpster near North 78th and State Streets. Deputies found the pickup near 73rd and Ernst Streets and placed the GPS device on the vehicle, the sheriff's office said. The 3 juveniles subsequently were arrested, the sheriff's office said, and 2 of them said they had stolen the pickup. Deputies searched one of the juveniles' bedrooms and found a Toyota key fob, 3 theatrical masks, and several rolls of duct tape, the sheriff's office said. Also, from Iowa, Des Moines, an autopsy revealed that 9 plastic baggies containing heroin were found in the stomach of a Des Moines man who died after being found unconscious in his Polk County jail cell. The Polk County Sheriff's Office announced the additional autopsy results Thursday for 38-year-old Lamont Alls. He was pronounced dead at a hospital on March 25th. The Polk County Medical Examiner Monday found a plastic baggie containing 9 smaller baggies with an unknown substance in Wall's stomach. A drug screening during the autopsy indicated there was heroin present in Wall's system.
And at 45 minutes past the hour, we'll turn to the obituaries from each of our papers. These from the Lincoln Journal-Star for Friday, the first day of April. Donaldson, Betty Marie Nelson Donaldson, was 89 years of age and lived in Lincoln. The Butheris, Mazer, and Love Funeral Home is handling services. In lieu of flowers, memorials may be sent to the Juvenile Diabetes Research Fund, the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation, June Foster was 95 and lived in Lincoln, formerly in Pawnee City. The Wary Mortuary in Pawnee City. Hogue, George Ralph Hogue, was a resident of Lincoln and died March 30. Hulbert, Kenneth Lee Hulbert, was 86 when he died in Lincoln on March 30. Johnson, Shirley A. Johnson, was 86 when she died in Fairbury on March 24. Lonsdale, Mildred J. Lonsdale, was 92 and lived in Lincoln. The Butheris, Mazer, and Love Funeral Home is handling arrangements. Mitchell, Martin D. Mitchell, was 57 and lived in Lincoln. He died on March 28. The Bremen Mortuary, 72nd Street Chapel in Omaha, Nebraska, is handling services. Mooring, John Elliott Mooring, was 67 and died in the Lincoln area. He was a veteran serving in the U.S. Army. Private family services will be held at Calvary Cemetery. Memorials to the Alzheimer's Association or the American Diabetes Association. LaRicci, I think it's Ostermiller, Leona or Oni, Catherine LaRicci Ostermiller, was 99 when she died in Lincoln on March 25. Services will be held at 1 p.m. on Monday, April 4 at the Wyuka Chapel in Lincoln. Rowe, Dorothy M. Rowe, that's R-O-H-E. She was 90 and lived in rural Pickerel. The Griffiths Havendick Chapel in Beatrice is handling services. Romore, that's R-O-M-O-H-R, Mark Archie Romar, was 90 years of age when he died. He was a veteran serving in the U.S. Army during World War II. The Met's Mortuary in York is handling services. Memorials are suggested to the Shriners Hospital for Children, the Masonic Eastern Star Home for Children in Fremont, or in care of the family for further designation. Ryan, Thyra May Ryan, was 99 when she died in Plattsmouth on March 31. Stansberry, Mabel E. Stansberry, was 98 and lived in Lincoln. The Roper and Sons Funeral Home is handling services. Vogelsang, Larry Eugene Vogelsang, was 69 and lived in Lincoln. He was a veteran serving in the U.S. Air Force. Celebration of Life will be held at 2 p.m. on Sunday, April 3, at the Veterans of Foreign Wars Post 7873, Lake Texoma in Pottsboro. The Johnson Moore Funeral Home is handling services. Watts, David Watts, was 56 when he died in Lincoln. He was a veteran serving in the U.S. Army. Flowers and contributions for the Watts family can be made to Lincoln Marian Church. The Aspen Aftercare Service is handling arrangements. And my final notice is for Wessel. Lee Walter Wessel was 78 and lived in Palmyra. The Hammonds Family Funeral Services in Elmwood.
These are the obituaries and funeral arrangements from the Omaha World Herald. Adamson, Wallace Clifton Adamson Jr., 74. A cremation service is being conducted by Arbor Cremation Society. Anderson, Jerry C. Anderson, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Air Force, retired. He was a veteran. The service is Saturday. Memorial service at 3 p.m. at Grace Baptist Church. Military honors by Offutt Air Force Base Honor Guard. Memorials will be directed to the family to benefit veteran service organizations. Bell, Gail A. Bell, 68, of Omaha. Memorials can be directed to the family, care of Prairie Meadows, 13208 Meredith Avenue, Omaha, Nebraska, 68164. Private family services will be held. Bell, Jean F. Bell, 74. Homegoing celebration Saturday, April 2nd, 2016 at 10 a.m. with viewing beginning at 9 a.m. all at Greater St. Paul COGIC. Canuco, Breeze, Canuco Breeze, 69. Private family service planned. Clanton, Shauna B. Clanton, 62. Services Saturday, 11 a.m. at Kuntz Memorial Lutheran Church. Memorials to Kuntz Memorial Lutheran Church. Cole, Marion Haas Cole, 63. Mass Monday, 12 noon at Holy Name Church. Memorials to Holy Name School. Cotton, Diane E. Patstone Cotton, 67. Celebration of Life service at 2 p.m. Saturday, April 2nd, 2016, West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home. Memorials to be directed to the family. Donaldson, Betty Marie Nelson Donaldson, 89. A massive Christian burial, 10:30 a.m. at Blessed Sacrament Catholic Church, 17th and Lake Street in Lincoln. In lieu of flowers, memorials may be sent to the Juvenile Diabetes Research Fund, Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation. Ellis, Althea Ellis, 97. Visitation Saturday, April 2nd, at Bellevue Christian Church, with the funeral services following at 11 a.m. Memorial donations to the Bellevue Christian Church or the American Cancer Society. Engelke, Marion Douglas Engelke, 87, complete notice later. Folkers, Gerald Jerry F. Folkers, served in the United States Marine Corps and was on the Omaha Fire Department for 27 years. A memorial service is at 3 p.m., all at Roeder Mortuary, 108th Street Chapel. Jennifer Jacobson, 54. Jennifer L. Jacobson, 54. Memorial service, 11 a.m. Friday, April 1st, at Luther Memorial Church, Western Avenue in Omaha. Donations to a charity or Allegiant Hospice. Ladwig, Dr. Harold A. Lagwood, 93. He was a veteran. He served in the United States Marines and the Navy Reserves for 40 years. His funeral is 3 p.m. Sunday, First United Methodist Church. Memorials are suggested to First United Methodist Church in Wilson, North Carolina. Wilson Memorial Service, 2811 Fieldstream Drive in Wilson, North Carolina, conducting the service. Mildred B. Lee of Council Bluffs. She was 96. Funeral service Monday, 11 a.m. at Neola Presbyterian Church. Memorials are suggested to Neola Presbyterian Church. McCarthy, Ruby McCarthy, 82. Services 9 a.m. Saturday, St. Mark Baptist Church. Memorial suggested to American Cancer Society or CHI Hospice. McDermott, James F. McDermott, 87. He was a veteran. His services are 12 noon Saturday at St. Vincent de Paul Church. McGrath, James B. McGrath, 73. Visitation Friday, April 1st, 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. at Corisco Larkin, Stanislawitz. Mitchell, Martin D. Mitchell, 57. Celebration of Life, 12 noon Tuesday, April 5th at Bremen Mortuary, 72nd Street Chapel. Nichols, Irma Jean Nichols, 83 of Omaha. Graveside services were held Thursday, March 31st at Grange Cemetery in Honey Creek, Iowa. Nolan, Donna E. Mills, Nolan, 81. Service Saturday at 5 p.m. at West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home. O'Connor, John Robert Bob O'Connor, 93. He was a veteran. Massive Christian burial Saturday, 10 a.m. St. Robert Bellarmine Church. Interment at Calvary Cemetery with military honors by Benson VFW Post 2503. Odehoodsden, Mary Fitch Odehoodsden, 76. A memorial service will be held at First Lutheran Church in Blair on Saturday, April 2nd at 11 a.m. Patano, Anthony R. Patano, Dr. Anthony R. Patano, 94. He was a veteran. Massive Christian burial Saturday, 9:30 a.m., Christ the King Church. In lieu of flowers, memorial may be directed to the Creighton University School of Medicine at Creighton University in Omaha. Heapy Hoffman Dwart Cutler handling service. Prentice, Richard B. Prentice, 87. Services Saturday, 2 p.m., Benton Street Chapel. Memorials will be directed by the family. Pruill, Patrice M. Pruill, 61. Services Friday, 11 a.m., King of Kings Lutheran Church. Rosinski, Jerry Rosinski, 85. He was in the U.S. Air Force. Services Sunday, 2:30 p.m. at the Bethel Cemetery. Donations to the Rose Blumkin Home, Temple Israel, or the charities of choice. Rosso, Ronald A. Rosso, age 62. A celebration of Ron's life will be held at Nebraska Machine Products, 9101 F Street on Sunday, April 3rd at 4 p.m. Memorials to Open Door Mission, Sienna Francis House, or American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, Nebraska Chapter. Seagrave, Janet May Seagrave, 83. A memorial service will be held on April 2nd at Rockbrook United Methodist Church at 10:30 a.m. Smith, Mary J. Roush Smith, 86. Funeral service 12 noon, Monday, April 4th at Bellevue Christian Center in Bellevue. Visti. Helen A. Jurgovic, Visti, 88. Funeral Saturday, 9:20 a.m., Bethany Chapel to St. Peter's and Paul Church. Massive Christian burial, internment at St. John Cemetery.
Listeners' memorials to the Radio Talking Book Network are tax deductible, and they go a long way toward keeping us on the air. Please keep Radio Talking Book in mind when memorials are listed as donor's choice or your favorite charity. Donations may be sent to the Radio Talking Book Network. Our address is 7101 Newport Avenue, Suite 205 in Omaha, Nebraska. The zip here is 68152. Thank you for being a Radio Talking Book Network listener and supporter. And Bev and I will be back following a short break with editorials, entertainment, business, and sports. We just don't have our...
I found one that wasn't marked. I had to do some quick math. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, Ann Pelican, for reading the home delivery menu for us today. You can hear the home delivery menu each and every weekday at about this time on the Radio Talking Book Network in Nebraska. Now, here is Pulse of the Planet for today. There's an old saying that every stick has two ends. When you think about that smartphone that virtually every one of us is carrying around, sure it's an amazing, useful tool, but what about the other side of the stick? I'm Jim Messer, and this is the Pulse of the Planet. When we live our life through these screens, and we're going to mediate it through these screens, what does that take away from our sensory experience of the world around us? Shelley Mishra is assistant professor of the Department of Public and International Affairs at Virginia Tech. Technology companies, are always trying to reduce perception in our lives. It's so difficult to find a way around.
Okay, editorials. What's going on? Didn't it seem like it took us that state news just went on forever?
Yeah,
looking at the time, and I thought, are we ever going to get through this? Good thing there was a lot. Okay, what do you want to start with?
Having a sense of belonging and sense of place in the cities and environments that we inhabit. One of my students said, my mom always tries to
Wait, we're going to have to read everything, aren't we? What do we have? Oh, not that long.
The question asks you, what kind of knowledge are we losing when we do not want this information from our parents or our friends?
What do you can start when you can start with the bottom.
Yeah,
Since you did this solar stuff here. But have you seen they showed that is
it really,
coffee.
yeah,
Yeah, look at
the
that.
Sparty.
Wouldn't it be hilarious if there's somebody dead who's got it in? And, I mean, it's just too much of a coincidence.
You're listening to the Radio Talking Book Network.
Are you going to take the first one?
I will. Radio. Now, let's return to our readers for the second hour of reading from the Omaha World Herald. Here once again are welcome and Beverly Lighthead.
And we are back with the second half, and we'll begin with the opinion page from each of our papers. We'll start with this kind of lighter opinion from a column titled Furthermore. Call the Big Ten offices. With a sower drawing on Nebraska's new license plate supposedly representing the statue on our Capitol, but clearly resembling a sculpture on a Michigan State University bell tower, There seems to be only one thing left to do. To the list that already includes Floyd of Rosedale for the Iowa-Minnesota contest, the Little Brown Jug for Michigan, Minnesota, and the Old Hoken Bucket for Indiana, Purdue. How about adding a new football trophy? The Cornhuskers and Spartans could battle for the Sowergate plate.
Here's another opinion from the editors of the World Herald. Back in the day, farmers used to hold barn raisings. An entire community would gather to help build a family's barn and socialize in the process. Barn raising might be passé, but generosity certainly still thrives in rural communities. That was confirmed again this week as Nebraska cattle producers began donating hay and fencing supplies to their counterparts in Kansas and Oklahoma. The area had been devastated during the past week by wildfires roaring across hundreds of miles of land, destroying nearly 368,000 acres, largely pasture, in what is being called the Anderson Creek Fire. In Oklahoma, about 600 head of cattle died. Fences and buildings were destroyed, and 1,000 round bales of hay were burned. In Kansas, ag officials said damage to livestock, fencing, water systems, and stockpiled hay would reach into the millions in the state's largest wildfire on record. Nebraska ranchers know from bitter experience how destructive fires can be. In 2012, more than 520,500 acres of Nebraska lands were scorched during a devastating fire season, and help poured in. Area ranchers and farmers donated hay, food, and other provisions. Cash donations poured in from as far away as New York, Nevada, and Texas. Now ranchers in Kansas and Oklahoma are suffering, and Nebraskans are among those on the helping end, with the Nebraska cattlemen sending hay and fencing supplies. It's the neighborly thing to do.
And these are some columns in the Omaha World Herald's Public Pulse. Randy Luskowitz, maybe, of Omaha writes, I like our newly designed sower license plate for what it is, but more importantly, for what it represents. I am amazed every time I set foot in the state capitol and leave ever more proud to be a Nebraskan. From my first trip as a fourth grader to my most recent trip, a Capitol visit is a perpetual study of the arts and humanities because of the thematic program is designed by Hartley Burr Alexander, which explains the Capitol's decorations and inscriptions. The sower symbolizes agriculture as a barefoot man, shirt sleeves and pants rolled up and wearing a sun hood as he works planting seeds. I see the sower spreading the seeds of the mosaic virtues of the state: temperance, wisdom, faith, justice, magnanimity, charity, hope, and courage, or reminding us that salvation of the state is watchfulness of the citizen, and that wisdom, justice, power, and mercy are the constant guardians of the law. Below the sower in the Great Hall, the procession of life begins with vital energy floor mosaics. They represent life of man, depicting the genius of water, fire, air, and earth, and scenes of human activity, including an architect, a ball player, and a scientist. It concludes with the family. This does not scratch the surface as to the structural and cultural beauty in and outside the Capitol. Before one criticizes the sower design, I suggest one walk a mile in his shoes, including a trip, tour, and some study of our Nebraska state capitol. Ronald Calhoun of Hastings, Nebraska writes, regarding the stink over the new license plate design, it's hard to believe that most people have a passion for a darned old license plate. It seems as though we go through this ritual every time we're offered a new plate design. Personally, I think the sower plate would be okay, but a plain plate would be fine. After all, it's only a piece of metal. People need to grow up and be sensible. I'm sure we all have bigger fish to fry. Liz Hussman of Omaha writes, the governor's spokesman, Taylor Gage, stated, it's unfortunate that some people have tried to disparage this iconic piece of our heritage. He misses the point. Some of us think the license plate depiction of the sower disparages this iconic piece of our heritage. And Dorothy Pesic of Omaha writes, the sower on the new Nebraska license plate needs a little help. Can't something be done to him to update him a little? Emboss him, shade him, or something to really spark him up. Make us proud of our license plate. The faded figure just doesn't do it. And Shirley Morris of Omaha writes, I just learned of Omaha Senator Ernie Chambers' mow everybody down statement, referring to how upset he was at fellow legislators during the debate over a bill that would ban job description based on sexual orientation or gender identity. What a pathetic example Chambers is setting for the young people in his district and for all Nebraskans. He should be ashamed and apologize to the entire state.
Richard Rader of Fremont has some ground rules for productive debates. How to have an educational presidential debate. And these are his points. First of all, no audience. Second, only the person speaking has a live microphone. Third, a time limit of 90 seconds with time not used banked for other questions. Fourth, only one person on the interview panel. And last, a fact-check panel that can respond to nominees' answers. Katie Haskins has this to say about the primaries. This election demonstrates precisely why our country should eliminate winner-take-all primaries. Millions of people are not being represented to the point where they wonder why they should even bother to vote. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump is a playground bully who will pick up his toys and leave the party if he doesn't get his way. Not only is he unqualified to be president, but his lack of a social filter is dangerous in terms of being diplomatic with world leaders. If Trump becomes America's next president, the United States will become the laughingstock of the world. Also from Diane Green, is Omaha Mayor Gene Stothert or anyone in city leadership listening? Our city's streets are a mess. Potholes, cracks, unfinished construction. Enough with the excuses. Let's repair them soon before our visitors arrive in Omaha for the Olympic swim trials and the College World Series. Our city officials surely know that urban appearance does matter in business. And from Edward Porter of Omaha, President Barack Obama, fulfilling his constitutional duty, has nominated a replacement for Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. Let's stop all of the political childness and hear what Judge Merrick Garland has to say. And Nebraska Senators Deb Fischer and Ben Sasse should remember that even though neither one is up for re-election this year, their refusal to take up this nomination could hurt their chances in the future.
And we will turn to this column written by Mark Thiessen. He is a fellow with the American Enterprise Institute and former chief speechwriter for President George W. Bush. He wrote this for the Washington Post. For years, Brussels has been the epicenter for European outrage over the CIA's terrorist interrogation program. Now it is Belgium that has some explaining to do for its failure to effectively interrogate a high-value terrorist, an interrogation that might have foiled last month's deadly terrorist attacks. The carnage is a direct result of Europe's refusal to accept that terrorists must be treated differently than common criminals. When Salah Abdeslam, believed to be the logistics chief for an Islamic State terrorist cell, was captured, Belgian officials followed law enforcement procedures with precision. They provided Abdeslam a lawyer, told him that he had the right to remain silent, and put him into the Belgian criminal justice system. 4 days later, the terrorist cell carried out bombings in Brussels that killed 35 people, including at least 4 Americans, and injured hundreds more. Astonishingly, officials did not question Abdel-Sam at all for his first 24 hours in custody. He spent Friday night in the hospital recovering from a leg wound sustained in the raid. When he was finally returned to the police on Saturday, he was questioned by authorities for a grand total of 2 hours, and then was not questioned again until after the attacks. Why? He seemed very tired, and he had been operated on the day before, a senior Belgian security official told Politico. He seemed tired? That's precisely when they should be interrogating him. The CIA used sleep deprivation as one of its most effective interrogation tools. But here is the most incredible part. During those 2 hours of questioning, the Post reports, investigators did not ask about his knowledge of future plots. Seriously? Abdel-Sam was the logistics chief for the Brussels-based terror cell that carried out both the Paris and Brussels bombings. He could have identified the other members of his cell, the safe houses they used, how they communicated, moved money, picked travel routes, and, most important, the targets they had selected. But investigators did not bother to ask him about plans for new attacks. The mind simply boggles. Investigators had found unused detonators and weapons in a safe house with his fingerprints. Did it occur to them to ask what he had intended to use them for? Apparently not. Abdel-Sam's questioning is a textbook example of why the law enforcement model for interrogating terrorists is a disaster. As we saw in Brussels, law enforcement officials are in no hurry to extract answers from a detainee because they are questioning terrorists after an attack has occurred. Their goal is to extract a confession in order to secure a conviction. In such circumstances, patience is a virtue. But in an intelligence-driven interrogation, patience is deadly. Interrogators are trying to get information from the terrorist quickly before an attack occurs. In such circumstances, you need to take a terrorist from a state of defiance to a state of cooperation quickly. Speed is of the essence. It is simply unconscionable that Abdel-Sam was allowed to protect the identities of cell members and their plans for the Brussels attack. But that is only the beginning of the shameful incompetence on display here. Not only did officials not ask Abdel-Sam about future attacks, they compounded that error by holding multiple press conferences in which they bragged about his arrest and boasted how he was cooperating. Belgian officials should never have publicly acknowledged Abdel-Sam's capture. When terrorists learn that one of their comrades is being interrogated, they rapidly begin purging email accounts, shutting down phone numbers, dispersing operatives, and closing other vital trails of intelligence, and in this case, likely accelerating attack plans. If a terrorist capture is kept secret, these intelligence trails may remain warm for some time, allowing officials to exploit them as they extract information from a detainee. This case demonstrates the need for some form of secret detention and an intelligence-driven approach to interrogating captured high-value terrorists. In the CIA's experience, 2/3 of detainees cooperated without any enhanced interrogation techniques at all. Just the experience of disappearing into secret detention with no idea where they were and no lawyer present was enough to get them talking. Officials in Europe and the United States need to wake up and change their approaches. The Islamic State released a video over the weekend featuring 2 terrorists, allegedly Belgian nationals, celebrating the Brussels attack from inside Iraq. One of them looks into the camera and declares, "This is just the beginning of your nightmare. If we keep treating terrorists like common criminals, that nightmare will soon become reality."
And finally, one more opinion from the editorial staff of the World Herald. Terrorists are keeping an eye on the world's hospitals, universities, and private industry sites for an unsettling reason. They're looking to steal radioactive material that might be used to create a dirty bomb. Such a device would use conventional explosions to hurl low-level nuclear material over a heavily populated area. Depending on its particular makeup and the location where detonated, a dirty bomb would not cause catastrophic levels of death and injury, but could leave billions of dollars of damage due to the costs of evacuation, relocation, and cleanup. And the inevitable follow-on threats could have severe economic and psychological repercussions, states a new report from the Nuclear Threat Initiative, an advocacy group that tracks nuclear materials. Access to a contaminated area could be denied for years, the report said, as a site is cleaned up well enough to meet even minimum environmental guidelines for protecting the public. Imagine the possible ramifications if such a device were detonated on Wall Street, near the Pentagon, or on any heavy populated area. Worldwide, the ingredients for such a destructive device are located at thousands of sites in more than 100 countries, many of them poorly secured and vulnerable to theft, the report states. President Barack Obama this week is hosting an international conference that seeks to build on agreements to bolster the security of weapons-grade and low-level nuclear materials. It's an eminently worthy goal. Nations around the world have an obligation to join in this effort to safeguard innocent people from what could be a catastrophic threat.
And now at 20 minutes past the hour, we'll turn to some of the entertainment-related news and lighter columnists from each of our papers. This is the Ask Amy column appearing in the Omaha World Herald. Dear Amy, I work at a busy hair salon as a stylist. I love my job and the salon where I work. I get along well with the other stylists. However, the stylist I work next to lets his clients bring a friend or two in to stay with him while he does their hair. I can understand if it's a child, but these are adults. These friends will plop themselves down in another stylist's chair, usually mine, and converse the whole time during their appointment. Some of these procedures can take hours. They even at times bring food, the detritus of which is often left behind for me to clean. I'm as polite as I can be when I have to inform them that I need to have my chair for my clients and point out the reception area, suggesting that they might be more comfortable waiting there. Though most people will apologize and move, usually to another stylish chair, some people actually get angry that I've had the audacity to make that request. I've had some of his guests ask if maybe I could move. I've even had people walk in front of my clients while I'm working and just stand there between my client and my mirror. How would you like it if I brought my friends into their office to enjoy a pizza while I did business with another person in the company? I've tried to talk to this stylist to no avail. What should I do? Signed, Frustrated. Dear Frustrated, if you politely correct people when you ask them to move and your request bothers them, too bad. You should see if the salon owner can switch your chair to another station. Also, ask the salon owner to enforce a no eating rule at the hairstyling stations. It seems extremely unsanitary, unappealing, and faintly gross to eat while tiny pieces of hair, not to mention chemicals and other products, are set loose in the atmosphere. If you're trapped where you are and can't switch chairs, speak with the neighbor stylist again and remind him that you each rent your space and that you don't want his client's guests in your space. Perhaps a piece of colored tape on the floor marking the space from your chair to the mirror will serve as a visual reminder of the sanctity of your space. Dear Amy, I recently attended the wedding of a daughter of a good friend. Where we live, our weddings are strictly envelope gifts. The rule of thumb is to give enough to cover your plate, which means $100 to $200 a person. After the ceremony, the reception consisted of a 5-hour after party at a club. There was lots of booze and loud music dancing, but no food. My guest and I had to leave halfway through to find a nearby cafe to get a burger, which we after which we returned to the party. I gave a very generous gift, and I'm okay with that. But I will be seeing my friend soon, and I know she will ask me if I had a great time. How can I possibly look her in the eye and lie? It was the worst wedding I ever attended. Signed terrible liar. Dear liar, there is lying and then there is socially acceptable and polite deception. People exercise this form of social interchange every day. To do this well, you have to be vaguely polite, resist the temptation to supply any details, and toss the whole thing back in the other person's direction before they catch on. When you see your friend, ask her if she and her family and the wedded couple had a good time. If she asks you what you thought of the wedding, you can say, I was so happy to be there and to celebrate with all of you. Thank you for inviting us. I'm very happy for the couple. Did they have a blast? Dear Amy, I'm responding to the letter from Want to Do Right about wanting to apologize to his long ago ex-girlfriend for treating her badly before he dies. I'm an ex-girlfriend whose first love recently passed away from leukemia. We hadn't seen each other in more than 20 years. I would give anything to speak with him just one more time, to let him know I forgave him and how he treated me back then and that I always loved him. I hope this man reaches out before it's too late. Signed, Sad. Dear Sad, me too.
And here's a story from Bessie Freeman about the Rose Theater. If you're a parent, you probably think you've read Goodnight Moon a million times. The popular book has been a bedtime tradition for generations of small children. Now you and your child can see the book's bunny on stage, a musical adaptation of Margaret Wise Brown's 1947 bestseller, is the first show in the 2016-17 season for the Rose Theater. Goodnight Moon joins 10 other shows in a lineup that runs from September through June. Other highlights include the world premiere of Prancer, based on the 1989 film, Shrek the Musical, The Jungle Book, and several other shows based on widely read children's books. In addition, the theater at 2001 Farnham Street also is staging 2 shows in its pre-kindergarten programming initiative. Family season memberships, which provide 4 free tickets to 7 shows, discounts to 2 premium shows, and other benefits, start at $105 this year, an increase of $10. Individual tickets to most shows are $20, up from $18 in previous years. The theater has not increased ticket prices for several years, said Marketing and Public Relations Director Corey Radloff, and everything costs more. Rose Artistic Director Matthew Gutschik says he hopes the topics addressed in the coming season will start fun, thoughtful, and meaningful family discussions about values and goals. The season lineup includes, on the main stage in September, Goodnight Moon. In September and October, Shrek the Musical. In October and November, The Jungle Book. January and February, The True Story of the 3 Little Pigs. February and March, Huck Finn. March and April, Harold and the Purple Crayon. April and May, Stella Luna and Other Tales. The premium shows on the main stage are Prancer, which run in November and December, and Peter Pan, which run in June. The pre-K shows on the Hitchcock stage will be Mouse on the Move in October and November, and Thumbelina in January and February of 2017.
And this is Heloise's column with her household hints. Dear readers, make this easy card game if you'll be taking a trip anytime soon with children. They'll enjoy it, and it's a great way to get them more involved in the trip's surroundings. Cut out pictures from newspapers and magazines or print pictures from the internet of anything the children might see on the trip. Try to choose pictures that will be directly related to your travel, like mile and historical markers, such as the desert in Arizona or West Texas. Paste the pictures on index cards. Deal the same number of cards to each child. As the children see the objects on their cards, they put the card down as a scene pile. The child would see all or his the child who sees all of his or her cards first is the winner. Dear Heloise, I love to sew and quilt. To save time, I purchased multiple bobbins for my sewing machine and the same type of sewing needles I use when hemming, mending, or binding. Now, before I start any project, I wind thread around all 10 bobbins in one sitting. This way, when I run out of bobbin thread, I simply replace it with a full one instead of stopping to wind the bobbin. When mending, hemming, or binding, I thread multiple needles and carefully put them in a pincushion. When I run out of thread, I grab another needle and continue on without having to stop and rethread the needle. This saves a lot of time and energy. Signed, Georgia H. in San Antonio. Well, we sew well. I too thread several bobbins at one time. It's a bummer when running out of a bobbin thread halfway through a sewing. It's worthwhile having one or two threaded and ready to go so you can keep sewing rather than have to stop and thread a bobbin. Dear Heloise, I like to wear my sneakers with hidden socks. In the women's department, the socks are too small for my feet. On a whim, I went to the men's section. There are hidden socks for men to wear with loafers. After one washing, they fit nicely, hidden inside my sneakers. Signed, Jerry, via email. Dear Heloise, when I finish the last of a roll of paper towels, I leave the cardboard roll on the horizontal holder and neatly fold a dish towel over it until I get more paper towels.
Kenny Loggins will play the 26th annual free concert and fireworks show at Memorial Park. Bank of the West celebrates America. Known for hit songs such as Footloose, Danger Zone, and I'm All Right, Loggins will headline the show on July 1st. A two-time Grammy winner, Loggins is known as the king of the soundtrack for his work on numerous films in the 80s, including Caddyshack and Top Gun, as well as from the duo Loggins and Messina. Loggins last played Omaha in 2014. This summer's concert also will feature performances from Omaha cover band Finest Hour and Lincoln country rock group Dylan Bloom Band. As always, the evening will culminate in a fireworks finale. Proceeds from sales of plush bears and a portion of food and beverage sales at the Omaha Summer Tradition will benefit the food bank for the Heartland. Also, a tea shop is opening in downtown that was a tongue twister, downtown Papillion. The Papillion Tea Shop is set to open this month. The shop, which will be in downtown Papillion, will sell tea, teaware, and accessories. A soft opening is set for April 15th and begins at noon with free tea samples. The shop is at 134 North Washington Street. And also, Kona Ice of West Omaha, a locally owned island-themed dessert truck, will be celebrating on April 18th with free shaved ice at the W. Dale Clark Library, 215 South 15th Street, and at a parking lot at 86th Street and West Dodge Road to help stressed out people chill out on tax filing day. The deadline is April 18th this year because Washington, D.C. will celebrate Emancipation Day on April 15th. Iowans this year have until May 2nd to file their state taxes. This is the third year for the event, which is open to the public. Each customer will get a free cup of tropical flavored shaved ice. The truck will give away the ice at the two locations from 1:30 to 2:30 p.m.
And organizers of the Old Market Art Project will host a fundraiser next week for artists whose designs are selected to beautify the area around the fire-damaged Thames Pub building. Money collected at the event, scheduled for 6 p.m. Tuesday at Le Boulon at 1017 Howard Street, will go to stipends for the artists whose submissions were selected for banners to be placed around the construction zone at 11th and Howard Streets. The art project, announced by the Old Market Business Association in early March, aims to hang about 25 banners around the area for a year as crews work to restore the damaged building. The deadline for artist submissions was Thursday, but Peggy Pawlowski, co-chairwoman of the Art Project Committee, said organizers are extending the deadline for businesses and individuals looking to sponsor a banner. The project has about 15 of the 25 needed sponsorships, she said. Each 11 by 5-foot banner will be capable of displaying one large image or two smaller ones. Sponsoring a full banner costs $1,000. Sponsoring half costs $600. Each banner will display the name of the artist and the sponsor. Those interested in sponsoring a banner should contact Old Market's Art Project at cox.net. For the past months, organizers have been collecting submissions from artists for the banners. As of Thursday, more than 50 artists had turned in about 175 individual entries, said Steve Ragland, the committee member who oversaw submissions. The designs, he said, have been varied. Some are specific to the Old Market. Some are relating to visual arts, nature, photography, sculpture. A jury of local artists and art enthusiasts will select the winners, which will go on display during the annual Berkshire Hathaway annual shareholders meeting later this month. The selected artists will receive a minimum $100 stipend. The public will have the chance to weigh in on the choices at next week's fundraiser, Ragland said. For a $5 entry fee, attendees will be able to view all the art entries at the event. For an additional $20, they can select a favorite. The entry with the most votes will be displayed on a banner with a special People's Choice recognition. The event will also include wine, hors d'oeuvres, and a cash bar.
From Los Angeles, the director of Bridesmaids, Spy, and the upcoming Ghostbusters remake said he would add an equity clause to his future film contracts that requires gender-balanced casting of minor roles. Paul Feig said he supports such efforts to push the movie business toward gender parity. I think we need to set these things in stone so it forces everybody to think that way, he said. Feig was part of a panel discussion Wednesday about Hollywood's gender bias. The talk, with actress Maria Bello, directors Carolyn Sue, and Tina Mabry, and University of Southern California professor Stacy L. Smith, followed a screening of The 4%, Film's Gender Problem. The film's title refers to the number of top movies directed by women over the past dozen years. Smith, who studies on genders in Hollywood, informed the documentary suggested A-list stars consider an equity clause in their contracts so that movies might reflect real-world demographics. Her research found that women represent 30% of speaking roles in the movies of 2014. Bello said she is part of an effort to develop a gender parity stamp to recognize productions that are actively increasing opportunities for women on both sides of the camera. Research shows women are half of film school students and movie ticket buyers, not to mention the human population, yet play the lead in just 1 of 5 films and are outnumbered by male directors 23-1.
We will turn to business news from each of our papers. Yesterday was a generally up day for stocks on Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrials, they were down 31 points, closing at 17,685.09. They're showing a gain of 1.5% year to date. The S&P 500 edged down 4.21 points to 2,059.74. It's up 77 hundredths of one. It's down 2.75% year to date. And NASDAQ was up fractionally, 56 hundredths of a point at 4,869.85, off 2.75% year to date. U.S. farmers plan to sow 93.6 million acres of corn in 2016, exceeding all analyst estimates and boosting prospects for higher supplies after this year's harvest. The average would represent a 6.4% increase over last year's plantings and would be the most since 2013, according to a report Thursday by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Farmers also told the government that they intend to reduce soybean plantings to 82.2 million acres, compared with 82.65 million acres in 2015. The increase in corn acreage is mainly due to the expectation of higher returns in 2016 compared with other crops, the USDA said. U.S. growers are facing a drop in profit for the third consecutive year to $54.8 billion as persistent surpluses depress crops and livestock prices, the USDA said in February. The hard times follow an era of record profit that peaked at $123.3 billion in 2013, when rising global demand combined with a domestic drought that crimped production. Ample harvests since then are boosting supplies of major U.S. crops. Corn inventories as of March in the United States, the world's biggest grower, rose 0.8% from a year earlier to 7.81 billion bushels, the government said in a separate report. That's the highest for this time of year since 1987.
First Data has sold one of its large buildings in the Exarban area to the University of Nebraska Foundation. Employees who work in the building at 6902 Pine Street will be transferred to other offices in the city, First Data said. A spokesman said there wouldn't be any jobs lost because of the sale. The company still will own the nearly 300,000 square foot building next to the one being sold and will still operate out of that building, the spokesman said. Officials from both organizations declined to share details of the transaction, including the cost. The building and the land it sits on are assessed at $22.9 million by Douglas County. The NU Foundation paid $30 million for the property, according to a UNO spokesman. Scott Snyder, University of Nebraska of Omaha's chief research officer, said the building's proximity to the school's College of Information Science and Technology and the College of Business makes it a good fit for classroom and research space, but by no means has that been decided. In fact, it could be some time before anything campus-related happens there. About 900 First Data employees work in the building, which will be reconfigured to fit whatever purposes UNO administrators decide. Some of those First Data employees will join the 1,000 who work next door at 6855 Pacific Street, but others will land at other local facilities, said First Data's George Webby, the company's local executive. We have more than adequate space for those employees across our real estate footprint in Omaha, he said. We need to ensure we situate them so there are similar functions seated next to each other. He declined to say when the move will begin. First Data employs about 5,000 people in Omaha, where the company was founded in 1971.
Chipotle Mexican Grill may be getting into the burger business. The company filed a trademark application this month for Better Burger, according to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office website. Chipotle, which has already invested in 2 smaller chains, is considering opening another restaurant concept focused on hamburgers, according to Chris Arnold, a spokesman for the Denver-based company. It's a growth idea we are exploring. General Electric asked the federal government to drop the too big to fail tag for GE Capital, saying that its financing operations are a shadow of what they were when the Federal Reserve placed it under strict oversight in the aftermath of the global economic crisis almost a decade ago. The company has been in broad retreat over the past year from its financial ventures, largely because of the cost and risk of complying with boundaries set by the Federal Reserve. McDonald's Corporation said Thursday it plans to open 1,500 new restaurants in China, South Korea, and Hong Kong as it looks to faster growing markets to help drive a global turnaround. McDonald's said it's looking for partners to help finance that expansion. The company said it will also give local managers more decision-making to respond to Asian consumers.
I'm going to turn to sports now. In soccer, 5 stars from the World Cup winning U.S. women's national team have accused the U.S. Soccer Federation of wage discrimination in an action filed with the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Alex Morgan, Carly Lloyd, Megan Rapinoe, Becky Sauerbrunn, and Hope Solo maintained in the EEOC filing that they are paid nearly 4 times less than their male counterparts on the U.S. men's team, based on U.S. Soccer's 2015 financial report. The filing was announced Thursday in a statement from the law firm representing the players. The numbers speak for themselves, Solo said in the statement. We are the best in the world, have 3 World Cup championships, 4 Olympic championships, and the USMNT get paid more just to show up than we get paid to win major championships. The union representing the players is currently involved in a legal dispute with U.S. Soccer over the terms of their collective bargaining agreement. The Federation filed a lawsuit this year seeking to clarify that its contract with the U.S. Women's National Soccer Team Players Association runs through the Rio Olympics until December 31st. The union maintains that the Memorandum of Understanding agreed to in March 2013 can be terminated at any time. That case is pending. The top players on the women's team are paid about $72,000 a year by U.S. Soccer, along with bonuses to play in a minimum of 20 exhibitions per year, the EEOC complaint says. Conversely, the men are paid per match, with a minimum of $5,000 a game, and additional payments based on the opponent's ranking and results. The women have a potential to earn $99,000 if they win all 20 exhibitions, while their male counterparts would earn $100,000 minimum for appearing in the 20 games before the opponents and outcomes are figured in, and possibly as much as $263,320 a year if they win all of their games. Citing another example of disparity, the complaint says that the women are paid $30,000 for making the World Cup team, while the men are paid $68,750. The U.S. women won the World Cup last year in Canada with a 5-2 victory in the final against Japan. The team earned a total of $2 million for winning the tournament, according to documents. The U.S. men's team earned $9 million the year before at the World Cup in Brazil, where they were knocked out in the round of 16. The Federation pays the men and women equally for qualifying for the Olympics and making the roster for the event.
And Creighton coach Ed Service mixed a little math into his pre-practice message Thursday. We're only guaranteed 31 more games, Service said. If we want more than that, we have to earn it. Hopefully, we'll start to do that this week. Still stinging from Tuesday's 8-2 loss at Nebraska that snapped their 10-game winning streak, the Blue Jays open a 3-game home series Friday night against Jacksonville. The Dolphins are 16-8 and would provide Creighton with a perfect tune-up for next week's Big East opener against Seton Hall. Jacksonville has stolen 38 bases in 24 games, 37th nationally. The national leader, Seton Hall, which has 69 steals. We have to get things moving in the right direction, Service said. We want to have some momentum going into next week. Nebraska had been the best offensive team we had seen, and Jacksonville is going to be similar to that. It's what we need going into next weekend. We don't need a team to play station-to-station baseball. That's not going to get us ready for Seton Hall. It's not as if Creighton has struggled through the early season. The Blue Jays are 16-5. They've swept 5 straight weekend series and had landed the 28th spot in the collegiate baseball rankings. But some of the feel-good took a hit in Tuesday's performance. The Huskers overwhelmed the Blue Jays with 2 out run-scoring hits that took the drama out of the game early. We didn't compete at the level we needed to, Service said. They definitely outcompeted us, and you could tell how they fought us at the plate and fouled off pitches. And it showed with how they delivered with 2 outs. All but one of their runs came with 2 outs, and that's just a competitive thing. That was one thing we wanted to make sure showed up, and it didn't. Creighton's only other loss, it got swept in its season opening series at Fresno State, was an 8-2 loss at Kansas State. The Blue Jays bounced back with 10 straight wins before Tuesday. It's disappointing when you don't compete at that level. You feel these guys are capable of competing, Service said. We did the same thing at Kansas State. Then we go on the 10-game winning streak. This team has been pretty good about letting a below-average performance go and then getting on to the next game. That's a plus of having a veteran group. They know we have bigger opportunities ahead of us.
Winnebago is coming to town next season to play Class A power Omaha Central in boys basketball. Central coach Ben Halling said Thursday the game is tentatively set for December 22nd in Omaha and could be played at Baxter Arena or Ralston Arena. School officials are in the process of looking at venues, Halling said. You saw the lines at State when Winnebago played. I think they could bring in as many as we could. Central, which lost 58-57 to Omaha Creighton Prep in the first round of the Class A state tournament, have a Native American starter, 6'9" Isaiah Poorbear Chandler, returning for his senior season. Winnebago, which took third in Class C2 this year after winning C1 in 2015, loses one starter from this year's team. Its top player, 6'7" senior to be David Wingett, like Chandler, is considered a Division I prospect. Halling said the impetus for playing Winnebago starts with Chandler, who takes his culture and background seriously and gets a chance to compete against other Native American players. And secondly, they're really good, he said. They've won a lot of games the past couple of years, and it will be neat to play them. They have more than one really good player on their hands. David, for sure, is very talented, and he plays with plenty of good athletes normally during the year. I'm sure he wants to try his hand at playing a higher class team as well.
And as we look at professional basketball, it was the Cavaliers over the Nets, 107-87. LeBron James scored 24 points to pass Dominique Wilkins and move into 12th place on the NBA's career scoring list. The Magic defeated the Pacers 114-94. Evan Fournier scored 25 points in Orlando's third straight win. It was the Bulls edging the Rockets 103-100. Chicago outscored Houston 32-20 in the fourth to stay in the race for a playoff spot. It was the Pelicans beating the Nuggets 101-95. The Thunder edged the Clippers 119-117. Kevin Durant had 31 points and Russell Westbrook added 26 and 11 assists for Oklahoma City. And Sacramento center DeMarcus Cousins has been suspended for one game after picking up his 16th technical foul of the season.
Ethan Lottman would like to leave his mark on the Nebraska gymnastics program, just like those Huskers he used to idolize when he was growing up. The next few weeks will be his last chance, and the Gretna grad is ready for the challenge. For 4 years, I've been training for this, Lottman said. I think I'm there. The Huskers will compete Friday and Saturday in the Big Ten Championships in Columbus, Ohio. Competition starts at 7 p.m. each night. Lottman isn't guaranteeing a Husker title, but he thinks his 8th-ranked team is in the mix. The Huskers are coming off an impressive performance March 20th when Lottman claimed the pommel horse title with a score of 15.45 to help the Huskers to a 432.450 team total, the third highest in school history. We're back in position again where we're contending to win, he said. We may not be a favorite, but we're up there. Lottman said at the start of every season, coaches would say this year was going to be special. This season, Lottman believed it. The Huskers are breaking school records at every meet, and they've beaten teams they haven't defeated in years. They are ranked in the top 10 in 5 of 6 events. We have 2 weeks left, and we're still getting better, Lottman said. It's amazing. It's exciting. Lottman will compete Friday in the pommel horse and possibly the high bars. The top 10 in each event advance to Saturday's individual finals. He's already won 5 titles this year on the horse. He's ranked 4th nationally in the event and thinks he has the degree of difficulty and ability to make it to Saturday's competition. Last spring, he was NU's first All-American in an individual event since 2013. I just have to put it together 2 days in a row, and it should all be in place, he said. Lotman has been competing since he was 3, and the sport just stuck. He loves performing in front of a crowd. He was part of the Cahoy's Gymnastics Training Center, and he said it means a lot to continue the tradition of someone from the club competing for NU. He and redshirt freshman Andrew Zimbal, who attended Papillion La Vista, are the only 2 Nebraskans on the squad of 19. Zimbal also trained at Cahoy's. While he'd love to do well this weekend and the NCAA postseason, Lotman said it's all about the team for him. With so many talented programs competing, it won't be easy for NU to win this weekend, but every good performance helps the cause. You think about yourself second. If I hit an average routine, I should be in the finals, and we'll see from there, Lotman said. I don't think I need a miracle, but it's possible to walk away with a title. You want to bring that back for the team.
In some college basketball notes, freshman guard Andrew Fleming has been released from his scholarship at Iowa so he can transfer to another school. Fleming averaged 2.2 points and 1 assist in 11 games last season. Fleming said he's seeking a better situation for his college career. Fleming is the second Hawkeye in as many days to announce he's leaving the program. Fellow freshman Brandon Hutton said Wednesday he's transferring as well. Congratulations, you made March Madness. Oh, wait a second, not really. The NCAA acknowledged yet another Selection Sunday foul-up. This one involved sending a text message to staff at South Carolina notifying the Gamecocks they had made the NCAA tournament. Well, not exactly. The Gamecocks were one of the last 4 teams left out. NOLA.com first reported the news Thursday. The NCAA was already being ridiculed for allowing its bracket to be revealed via social media while the 2-hour CBS selection show was ongoing. In other news, Xavier police in Ohio said J.P. McCura had been charged with disorderly conduct for pulling down his pants at a Cincinnati bar. Police said the 20-year-old sophomore was also charged with obstructing official business for presenting a fake ID. Wes Flanagan is the school's new basketball coach at UALR. He succeeds Chris Beard, who left last week to become UNLV's coach. And in Wisconsin news, George Washington's Jonathan Sipsis was hired as the new women's coach. She succeeds Bobby Kelsey, who was fired after Wisconsin went 47-100 during her 5 years.
Top-ranked Omaha Creighton Prep's 5 p.m. baseball game Friday against number 2 Millard South will draw attention to the school's campaign to install artificial turf on its diamond. Athletic Director Dan Schnitzel said the game had been designated Friends and Alumni Night with free admission and free burgers and hot dogs while they last. The goal is to raise $1.2 million for the 3-month project, which could start in August after the Summer American Legion season. It's exciting, Schnitzel said. We think the addition of another all-turf field here in Omaha will be a positive for everyone. Like the artificial turf field at Omaha West Side, there will be no dirt on the prep field. Schnitzel said AstroTurf will be used and it will be green. I don't think anybody wants to see blue turf out there, he said. It will be green and the areas where there is usually dirt will be brown. Schnitzel said Prep's football teams also will be able to use the field. And in some moves by coaches, Jim Weeks, who was a 400-game winner in boys basketball at Beatrice before 4 seasons at Doane College, is returning to high school coaching as Auburn's next coach. Southern Valley's John Miller, who won more than 700 games in girls and boys basketball, is retiring. He and his wife, assistant coach Sandy, are planning a move to Lincoln. Waverly boys basketball coach Anthony Harms is stepping down to spend more time with his family. Columbus SCOTUS has promoted assistant coach Tyler Swanson to replace Jeff Onuka, its new principal, as head coach boys basketball. Onuka's career record was 317-141.
And from Lincoln, it was a quick comment delivered somewhat in jest from a veteran teammate whose trash-talking motivational tactics often ended up penetrating the competitive soul of his younger pupil. Not long after Deshaun Neal underwent knee surgery and was ruled out for 2015, he got a quick word from the guy he'd been trying to mimic since arriving in Nebraska. Malik Collins walked up to Neal and delivered, "When you come back, you're going to suck." Neal smiled when he retold that story Tuesday, but he admitted he took it to heart. So when he wasn't meeting with trainers for early morning or late evening rehab sessions, and when he wasn't using the extra free time to stay ahead in schoolwork last fall, Neal was doing all he could to get ready for 2016. He adopted a stricter diet, dropped bad weight, and added muscle. He watched film. He studied Collins and the other defensive linemen, taking notes on how they corrected their flaws. He set aside time on the weekends to meet with other redshirts, Alex Davis, Carlos Davis, Khalil Davis, so they could run through drills, particularly the exercises focused on hand placement. "I was always trying to work on something so I wouldn't be as terrible as Collins was saying," Neal said. It's how Neal maximized his redshirt year. Along the way, he realized a couple of things. He was out of shape. This wasn't too much of a surprise since Neal had been able to run regularly during the month before joining NU's program. He had surgery on his left knee after high school. He said he wasn't as lean and has hoped to be when fall camp started. He was unprepared to play his position too. There was so many details, Neal said, whether it's technique or strategy. And even when you're up to speed on the intricacies, you still may not be able to perform at your full potential if you don't fully grasp the system's principles. It is top of the hour, so time for us to make way for other programming on the Radio Talking Book Network. I'm Ralph Morocco. It's been a pleasure to read for you today.
And I'm Beverly Leidick, and everybody have a great April 1st, and don't get fooled.
Oh, that's right. And thank you very much, Ralph and Beverly, for keeping us informed with fine reading from the Omaha World Herald. Have a wonderful weekend from all of us here.
Well, that's probably the best thing that's going to happen to me now all day. And my mind is just not on this. I have to go to my friend's house now.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Pumping the wattage into your cottage. We got 50,000 watts of pure rock and roll. This is the all new RGBN.
What is all good?
April Fool's edition of RGBN. Although this is just an April Fool's joke, imagine losing Radio Talking Book service forever. You can help keep Radio Talking Book Network on the air by
Well,
donating